Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Liger Garrido Power Hour. Now taking over America, as is Cornel West's campaign and the struggle for socialism. So we're happy to have you with us today. Should be a good stream. We're going to talk about and react to Cornel West announcing his run on Rumble on Russell Brand's show, which has a whole bunch of leftists up in arms saying, how could you use Rumble? Don't you know there are right-wingers who use Rumble? And how could you talk to Russell Brand? Don't you know there are right-wingers who listen to Russell Brand? So we're going to debunk some of that nonsense. We'll also watch the Irish MP Claire Daly talk to the Duran, which is one of my absolute favorite geopolitical news sources on YouTube, especially, that you should all be subscribed to. And if we have time, we will finally watch the Gray Zone talk to the NED on the phone. I know that we've been promising to react to that for like 20 streams in a row, but we'll actually get to it today. Maybe. No promises. But thank you for being with us tonight. Should be a fun one. We'll get right into it after the intro. Well, glad to be here. How's it going, Carlos?
It's going well. It's going better than it was after that great intro song that always gets me pumped up. By the way, happy 23rd birthday to Jacob. It was his 23rd birthday yesterday. Congrats, Jacob. I hope you had a wonderful birthday and you have a wonderful rest of your week, your birthday week as well. Tomorrow is Noah's birthday, so we're hoping to do a stream with him, maybe talking about the article he put out, the op-ed for Newsweek, which is pretty huge. Newsweek, I think, I don't follow their media, but I checked and they had like 3.5 million Twitter followers, so it's a big mainstream media site, and he was making the case for Cornel West in today's debate section, which appears at the top of the Newsweek newspaper. So it's his birthday tomorrow. It's also the birthday of my first dog child, my first Chihuahua. He's turning 3, I believe, and the birthday of my sister. So lots of birthdays tomorrow.
For sure. Happy birthday to your dog. Happy birthday to Noah, and special happy birthday to Jacob. Here, we'll go round of applause. Happy birthday, Jacob. Congrats on getting yourself some Marxist books for your birthday. That's, something that my own family called me crazy for. They were like, what do you want? And I said, I want the Gundris. And they were like, what is the Gundris? I'm like, it's like a compilation of Marx's notes before he wrote Capital, these big books. And they're like, you're insane. But okay, here's the Gundris. I'm like, it's not that insane. It helps reality make more sense. And then I've got, my brother just graduated, and I got him a copy of Capital Volume 1 and wrote like a 10-page mini essay to go along with it for him. So they're going to be insane with me soon, whether they like it or not. So happy birthday for real, though, Jacob. You're the man. Here is our buddy Noah. I don't know how I forgot to mention this, because literally this is the top of Newsweek. All right, I didn't search Noah Kratchvik. I didn't search Cornel West. I pulled up Newsweek.com, and right at the top here, you see Noah arguing Cornel West for president. I didn't even read the other lady's piece. I don't care about hearing that neoliberal hogwash, but I did read Noah's piece, and if you look right here, co-editor and theorist for the Midwestern Marx Institute for Marxist Theory and Political Analysis. How sick is that, everybody? And for me, this was like, there are so many leftists being doomers on Twitter right now about the Cornel West campaign, and not to hyper focus on, the tendencies in the left that annoy us, or the doomeristic left, when there are so many people on the left doing great stuff. But there's just been, it's hard to ignore all the people on Twitter who are like, oh, bourgeois elections are stupid. He's not going to win anyways. Who cares? It's like, yeah, he might not win, but this is an opportunity. Every election is an opportunity to elevate class consciousness and organize workers. That's how Lenin and every socialist revolutionary leader who was actually successful in creating a revolution said that bourgeois elections should be utilized. So for me, it's like you got two examples. You got the Kratchvik example, and then you got the doomer leftist on Twitter example. The Kratchvik example is, I'm going to use this election and Cornel West campaign as an opportunity to get socialist ideas on the front page of Newsweek.com, on the front page of a bourgeois media site. I am going to utilize this election as an opportunity and utilize the attention that workers are paying to the electoral system right now to boost socialist consciousness. Versus there are other socialists who are like, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to bitch on Twitter and do nothing productive. Personally, I choose to follow the Kratchvik example. I choose to follow Noah's example. I think this is an excellent piece, exactly how we should be utilizing Cornel West's campaign. And yeah, just really proud of him for this one.
And the context, when you know the context in which he wrote it, it's pretty insane. He wakes up usually at 4 a.m. To do his writing. So he woke up this morning at 4 a.m., committed to doing the task that they had asked him to do. Because, by the way, he didn't just submit this. They approached him to do an article on defending Cornel West. And he woke up at 4 in the morning, as he does every day, wrote for the next 2-3 hours this article, and then went to work and worked on top of a 30-foot ladder for, like 6-7 hours, maybe a little more than that. He had me edit the paper a little bit, did some copy edits, and then as soon as he got home, he got to reviewing those edits and then sending it in. And I think the lady made a couple more edits, and so it's the whole day is as archetypical of what Gramsci would have called an organic intellectual as you can get. Like, real proletarian, spends most of his day at work, doing productive labor, and then wakes up early to write and spends the time that he's not working, writing and working and advancing the class struggle ideologically. So, we got to have one of those slogans that the Cubans have. They say, strive to be like Che. We should start saying, strive to be like Noah. Very complete human being.
Absolutely. That's why I love Noah always downplays that one article he wrote on like walking the walk, or about how you should conduct yourself as a communist. But I've told them before, I think he's selling himself short. I think that's a very important article. I think it's a very important message for the left. For me, I mean, and I know people might get tired of me relating everything in the world to wrestling, but like if I had a wrestling team who acted the same way the left acts, it's like a culture of losing. It's a culture of doomerism, and that's changing, that's shifting. But it's not necessarily a positive or constructive culture on the left. It's just complaining and being angry about things a lot of the time. And Noah explains in that article and with his actions, that's not what being a socialist is about. Being a socialist is about, offering people an alternative, offering people a path of construction away from this path of destruction that capitalism puts us on, of ecological destruction and pushing us towards nuclear warfare and increased exploitation. So, yeah, I think Noah's article was more important than he gives himself credit for. But Yeah, super pumped that he was in Newsweek. The last time Newsweek hit us up was for they were doing an article about how TikTokers are pushing Venezuelan authoritarianism, which may have been about me. So they actually reached out to us for a comment, and we sent them back like a big long paragraph that they couldn't have taken out of context. So they
Wasn't
ended
that
up leaving us
political?
out of the article.
Was that political?
Oh, you're right.
Yeah,
That wasn't Newsweek.
yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
retraction.
It was one of
Uh,
the neoliberal ones.
Neolib
They
red.
all
I
blend.
was getting the red logo mixed up.
Yeah, but I
You're
think
right.
I don't know if political's bigger. They're both fairly big. I don't want to say anything because we hope that what Noah did for them today is repeated in the future. It'd be cool to have a Marxist column on there that's ran by Noah. But yeah, I mean, they allowed one of the key figures in a Marxist Leninist institute to write an op-ed for them. So I think that's something that's worth a hand of applause. That's the sort of courage that most bourgeois media I don't think has had in pretty much ever, because they've allowed like social democrats to go on there and write articles, but um, Noah's pretty clear about his politics not being social democratic. So
Right. I mean, it literally says Midwestern Marx Institute right on there. It's pretty awesome. I want to make sure that I didn't tell anybody that Newsweek rejected our article. Okay, I didn't. I just said we've had our disagreements in the past. Good. I haven't been spreading misinformation, everyone. We're good. We're good. So yeah, Newsweek, Politico. What's the difference? They're both neoliberal propaganda outlets for U.S. empire. It would be hard to find a outlet that's worse than Politico, though, in terms of being neoliberal. Like, I highly doubt Politico would have allowed Noah onto their website. I think Newsweek is quite a bit better in that sense. And where Pilgrim says they're bigger, which makes sense, more corporate funding and whatnot. But the only outlet that I dislike more than Politico is the Daily Beast, who literally like leaks the information and locations of independent journalists in Ukraine, so that the SPD can hunt them down and torture them and kill them. But yeah, excited to hopefully have a relationship with Newsweek here going forward, if they're gonna allow a Marxist outlook. So what do you want to react to first, Carlos? You want to jump into our boy Cornel West on Russell Brand, or do you want to watch Claire Daly on the Durand?
um, well, I guess to piggyback off the Noah article, it'd be good maybe to hit on Cornel West and then go to Daily. We also have that one video that we posted on Twitter that he explains why he went with People's Party and not another party. So I'm sure those questions are going to be popping up on the chat. So it might be worth to watch that. It's a short, maybe 3 minute clip.
Yeah, you want to send me that in the private chat while I
Yeah.
start playing the Russell Brand video. Perfect. All right, so this is Cornel West on Russell Brand. Interestingly enough, it was on Rumble, which is where Russell Brand is trying to push people. And just so people know, all of our content is on Rumble. A lot of purity fetish afflicted leftists complained about leftists putting their stuff on Rumble, because there are right wingers who use the website, and it's been portrayed as a right wing thing because they're big on free speech. But man, if they're going to offer a platform that gives us free speech, you might as well use it. And I have no problem with Russell Brand or Cornel West promoting Rumble, especially when we've had so many accounts banned. We've dealt with censorship so much. It makes sense that people would want to develop an alternative social media platform that's based on free speech. So I'm down with Rumble. And I think it was actually kind of cool that Cornel West announced his run for president on here. But
He has he
sorry.
comments on quite a few things before the interview though, so I think you might have to skip a little bit until he gets there, unless you did that already.
Okay. Yeah, I can skip there. I also really enjoy.
Oh, he might have highlighted it then. My
Okay.
bad. I thought you were in the full.
No,
Liger?
no, I found the clip. Yeah.
Okay,
I
perfect.
also really just like Russell Brand's show. I've realized a lot of leftists have written him off and canceled him because they cancel anything that's actually popular. But I enjoy his show a lot.
West, philosopher, political activist, civil rights leader, and free thinker. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Cornel West. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
My brother, you know I want to salute you, your brilliance, the fact that you are such a genuine force for good and have the courage to be yourself. But I want to salute Brother Garth. Garth got it going on. He's wonderful. And Brother James. And Brother James, you all make a magnificent team. And there's no doubt that when I decided to make my announcement, talked it over with my beloved wife, Anahita, I said, if I have a choice, I want to say it on a show that I watch regularly.
Wow, that makes me feel good. So take that, everyone who called me a bigot or a reactionary for watching Russell Brand's show. It was only a bunch of liberals who said that, but Cornel West watches it too. It's a good show, dude.
That's so weird too, because Russell Brand, in terms of the social issues, he takes the normal mainstream liberal positions. He's pro all the things that liberals or that the rat libs are in favor of. So I really don't understand why they would have a negative view of Brand. He's like uh, perhaps the Joe Rogan of Britain, but an easier to swallow, more left wing, consistently left wing Joe Rogan.
Right. It's like I said, they just don't like anything that's actually popular. Because then you're reaching out to people who are impure, who aren't in the club.
Religiously. Why? Because you're a truth teller and you are a justice seeker, my brother.
Dr. Cornel West, thank you very much for that flattery and praise, although in the case of Gareth and James, it was misjudged and misdirected. They are both borderline psychopaths. Dr. Cornel West, you have a very important announcement. We are honoured that you've chosen our platform to make this announcement. Please tell us why you are here talking to us today.
Well, you know, my dear brother, that I have been fighting for truth and justice for 55 years, beginning when I was 15 years old there in the chocolate side of Sacramento, Shiloh Baptist Church, and working with the Black Panther Party. Never joined the party, was deeply, deeply committed to their fundamental concern for poor and working people. And now, 55 years later, I've decided to continue that fight for truth and justice by running for the president of the USA on the People's Party to ensure that we can reintroduce to America the best of itself. And the best of America is Martin Luther King Jr., Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, it's Edward Said, it's Grace Lee Boggs, it's Chief Joseph, it's Luisa Marino, all of these different peoples of different colors and genders and sexual orientations of James Baldwin and Audre Lorde doing what? Telling America the truth about itself, and the condition of truth is always to allow the suffering of precious poor. And
one of the things I like about his campaign strategy and his rhetoric so far is that he's been recapturing the American revolutionary tradition, the American socialist tradition. He's been talking about Martin Luther King and all these revolutionaries who came before us, who we've made such a big deal about recapturing. Recapturing these heroes, understanding what they fought for, understanding how they changed society and how that helped lead to the material conditions that we're interpreting and dealing with today. And that's something Cornel West is always bringing into his analysis, talking about himself as a continuation of these socialist peace and justice movements throughout American history. So I think that in itself is really important rhetorically in pushing the kind of message that socialists want to push in this country, that socialism and justice are the continuation of our heroes, our historical heroes, like Martin Luther King.
And that's just like the common sense thing to do, to be honest. And it's always done. The tradition that he comes from has always done it. King would appeal to Frederick Douglass, to Thomas Jefferson, to Du Bois, to a whole host of people that were seen in the most progressive line of the American trajectory. Like, it's just the common sense thing to do. Even Bernie Sanders, he would appeal to MLK's legacy, to Debs's legacy, and to the legacy of progressive figures from our country's past. Norman Thomas sometimes. So it's that only stopped being a thing in a very insular and purity fetishist with relationship to the nation and national nihilist section of the U.S. left. And we try to repeat it because there's overlaps that we have with this part of the left, and maybe some of our audiences in those spaces. But really, the most normal thing to do is to appeal to the tradition of your people, the best parts of that tradition, in moving forward, so that this project doesn't seem like it just popped out of a void. It has historical legs, and those historical legs are an important factor in helping the struggle today move forward.
Absolutely.
Priceless working people to be heard. And yes, you're right, it is about love, because justice is what love looks like in public. But by love, what we're talking about is looking at the world through the lens of those Franz Fanon called the wretched of the earth, of poor and working people, not just in America, in the American empire, and this very fragile democratic experiment in the midst of that empire, but around the world. That was another reason why I wanted to be on your show. I wanted to be international. I wanted to be concerned about human beings, no matter where they are, no matter what color, no matter what gender, no matter what sexual orientation, no matter what national identity. And that's why we're calling for a paradigm shift, brother. We need a spiritual awakening and a moral reckoning in the face of institutionalized greed. That greed can be in Wall Street, can be in Silicon Valley, can be in the Pentagon. Greed at the top, especially. And I believe, of course, we got greed inside of all of us.
You pause that? I think one of the important things to note is perhaps a point of distinction with the rhetoric that you find in academia, in certain NGOs, and that gets trickled down into certain liberal media, and in the iron triangle of academia, media, and the NGOs, which is this very essentialist rhetoric of a certain discussion of diversity that Christian Parenti, I think he's critiqued it quite well, which is a form of diversity that's grounded in radical separations and focusing really on what people have that is different from each other, and in losing sight of the points of commonality. And this is often done by appealing to thinkers that in the past, when the points of commonality were ignored and the points of difference were undermined, they appealed to both. So, like, for instance, Du Bois never undermines the special characteristics of the black proletariat, but he always emphasizes the fact that there's a common element to it in the fact that they are proletariat, that they're working class and poor. And most people in this tradition have done the same thing, right? And what Dr. West is doing here is the same thing. He appeals to all the differences that span across the working masses, differences of race, gender, sexual orientation, whatever. And nonetheless, he always connects it to the fact that they're all connected as humanity in a project for the expansion of democracy, for the expansion of what we would call socialism. I don't think he's trying to use that rhetoric here, but and that's very important, because it's not like, hey, we either focus on difference or we focus on commonality. It's a more dialectical view, which says that we see in the different what is common, so that we can unite people, bring people together through a common struggle that doesn't lose sight of some of the specific issues that have to be taken account in different parts of the working masses.
Exactly. And that's why I like that his campaign is based on love. I mean, we might think of love as sort of an idealist thing or even a liberal thing, but I mean, Che Guevara himself said that all revolutionaries should be driven by love. And you can see that when he's talking about even the professional managerial class. Like, his analysis of a lot of the racism today is that a lot of working class people view the professional managerial class as the winners of neoliberalism, as the winners of globalization and the current economy. And then they associate that with transgenderism, with diversity, with all these supposedly left-wing or liberal cultural politics. So then that's what their beef is with. When in reality, it's a class antagonism between the proletariat and the professional managerial class. So the idea is to meet those people's needs. It's not to incite or inflame that conflict further, throw gas on the fire, but rather to say we're gonna meet everybody's needs in this country. We're gonna meet the workers' needs, so there's no longer this rage and jealousy towards the professional managerial class who kind of has been sitting on the high hog for a while. So yeah, lots of things to like about Cornel West's rhetoric so far.
Agreed with predatory capitalist tendencies that tend to suck everything up for money and for profit. And then we got the neo-fascism escalating, especially in the Republican Party. And what is that? That's institutionalized hatred. It plays on the fear of people. And see, Trump speaks to a number of white brothers and sisters who are catching hell, who are, in fact, in deep trouble, who deserve an attention in terms of having their basic needs met. That's precisely why I want Medicare for all. That's precisely why I want free education. That's precisely why I want access to living wages. That's precisely why I want to make sure people have access to quality housing. And so the question is, you cannot defeat neo-fascism by milquetoast neoliberalism. There's no way you can do it. You got to get the roots of it. You got to bring vision and passion to convince people not to follow neo-fascist Pied Pipers, but actually let them know that there are persons on the so-called left, which is simply say persons of integrity, honesty, and decency looking at the world through the lens of poor and working people. That's really what it is. So I don't want to get into the labels. I'm talking about the substance.
There isn't full overlap in the way that we analyze the situation. He seems to be approaching the question assuming that a big chunk of the Trump supporters, what speaks to them about Trump in part is some of the racial rhetoric that's tied to hate discourse. And at least in the experience that Eddie and I have organizing in the Midwest, most of the Trump supporters that we've spoken to, it's the opposite. If anything, they support Trump in spite of the more hateful rhetoric, which they consider to be the thing that they disagree with the most. It's usually the populist rhetoric, the rhetoric.
I like Trump. He just needs to get off Twitter. You know how many times I've heard that?
Yeah.
About 1 million times.
Yeah. And just, some of the other comments that are like given at rallies about immigrants. I know that for most of the people that I've engaged with, working class Trump supporters, that isn't like what connects them to Trump. It's the quote pseudo anti-establishment discourse, and I think that's kind of lost sight of here. But regardless, it's still, his position still leaps and bounds ahead of not just like the neoliberal Bernie left, but also of many self-proclaimed communists that just scratch out big chunks of the working class that support Trump as, in the words of Comrade Hillary Clinton, a basket of deplorables, irredeemable working people, or the embodiment of some fascist threat. He's addressing it from a position of understanding why it is that they end up falling, in part understanding why it is that they end up falling from Trump, but really addressing their material conditions and hoping to come to them with open arms so that he can bring them into the movement, away from the negative things that make, in his head, make them align themselves with Trump, and towards a project that actually addresses their material needs. So again, with I don't think we'll ever find full, pure ideological alignment, and we shouldn't try to look for that as a precondition for support of Dr. West. But it's important, I think, to notice these nuances in the discourse, and we'll find more and more. But yeah,
right. The thing is, he's actually offering people something different than Trump.
Yeah,
he's actually offering people a program that's going to meet their economic needs, which is at the core of everything.
I'm talking about those who really have a deep care and concern about suffering people, no matter where they are. And in that way, you cut against a lot of the truncated public conversation. You get a realignment of not just perceptions, but of people finding themselves in coalitions they had not planned on being there with.
So I want to stop that, because he's talking about building coalitions. And I've seen so many people say, oh, I liked Cornel West so much. I loved Cornel West so much. He was one of my heroes. I can't believe he's running third party with the People's Party. How disappointing. Or I can't believe he's talking to Russell Brand. How disappointing. And I see that as people realizing that their politics were not as in line with Cornel West as they thought they were. Their politics weren't actually as radical as Cornel West's ever. They thought they were in line with Cornel West because they listened to a few of his lectures or whatever. But Cornel West is about reaching out to people who he has disagreements with, building coalitions with people who are imperfect and who don't line up with him 100% ideologically. And for a lot of these leftists who are claiming that Cornel West was one of their heroes, that's off limits. That's not allowed. You can't build coalitions. You can't talk to working class people. You can't talk about Trump supporters this way and say you want to meet their economic needs. They're impure. They're the basket of deplorables. So they're saying, oh, this is so disappointing to see Cornel West doing this. Well, this is what Cornel West has been about his entire life, leading with love and meeting people where they're at, and talking about meeting their economic interests and their economic needs that oftentimes lead people into bigoted positions. Building coalitions with people who are imperfect is radical. That is radical in itself. That's what a lot of the leftists need to realize, is that it is a radical position to want to build coalitions with people who you have disagreements with, right? And if you are finding yourself super disappointed with Cornel West once he actually gets in the streets and tries to build a real movement, a real coalition, you should consider that maybe your politics were never in line with Cornel West in the first place, because this is what he's always been about, is building a mass movement. And, you don't build a mass movement with purity.
Because he's building on the tradition of Du Bois and King and Baldwin and all the best leaders of, the Black prophetic tradition, the Black freedom movement. And as the comrade here says, I love how clear Cornel is about reaching out to working class white folks. I don't know why it's so taboo to do so. I'm 19 and Black, but I don't know. Yeah, and we've been told on the left that these people are irredeemable racists and bigots and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And even assuming that's true, what do you think is going to happen if you just leave them alone? They're just going to actually go to the fascists. But if you approach them and you show them how that whatever bigoted views that they have is a form of false consciousness, it's them not actually understanding reality correctly and what their actual class interest is, which is the interest that they should be propelled by, not this fake, superficial racial interest. Their class interest is what they should be focused on, and their class interest puts them in an overlapping position in terms of interest with, the Black working class, with Hispanic working class, with immigrants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what Dr. Cornel West is doing here, and it's the same thing that Du Bois did. There's many, 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 a plethora of passages, basically in every text that Du Bois writes after he becomes a Marxist specifically, but some before, where he says that the natural ally of the Black proletariat is the same white working class that they have been taught to hate, and that that each has been taught to hate each other reciprocally, and that if that veil of hate can be removed, they can realize their common interest and fight against the people that are not just proliferating the destitute material condition of each, but also proliferating the hate that has kept them separated. And that's what that's the tradition that Cornel West is building on and trying to bring back into socialist politics.
Absolutely. I have to pee so bad, so I don't know how much longer I'm going to make it into this video, but we'll listen to a little more.
That's crucial. That's exactly what we need. And what's at stake, my brother? You know better than I. You talk about it every day. The destruction of the species, the destruction of democracy, not just in the American empire, everywhere.
Doctor.
And most importantly, it's the destruction of our capacity to love, though, brother. You see, that's a spiritual emptiness. So I run as a jazz man of politics, because jazz is about three elements. It's about the blues, and the blues is about catastrophe. Catastrophe lyrically expressed, catastrophe genuinely engaged, catastrophe transfigured by compassion and community. I come from a blues people, the catastrophe of slavery, of Jim Crow, of Jane Crow, of mass incarceration, of being taught to hate ourselves. And yet here comes Ma Rainey, here comes Bessie Smith, here come Muddy Waters. What are they doing? They're telling the truth. They're telling the truth about America. We're not talking about America's race problems, or class problems, or gender problems, or sexual orientational problems. No, we're talking about catastrophes visited on indigenous peoples, visited on Black peoples, visited on women. You're talking about U.S. foreign policy. It could be in Iran, 1953. It could be in Guatemala in 1953. It could be in Panama. It could be in Iraq. It could be in Afghanistan. Those are not problems. Those are catastrophes visited upon precious human beings in every life in Iran, in Tel Aviv, in the West Bank, in Gaza, in Afghanistan, in Lithuania, in Ethiopia. Each precious life there has the same value as a life in London or a life in California.
I like that he brings in music too, and that just hits on everything Carlos is saying, is that he's really rooted in the Black revolutionary tradition. And if you listen to his lectures, he talks about the way that music was used in revolutionary movements throughout history. It was vital to the slaves to kind of have this collective culture and share messages with each other when they didn't have anything else, right? All their other material possessions and ownership was stripped from them. So music was one of the only ways that they could connect with each other and maintain their own unique culture and a culture of resistance, which is what what Cornel West is rooted in, just like you said, Carlos.
California. That's the best of America. That's what Martin King was talking about. That's what I am running on. That's the tradition that runs through my veins. That's the tradition that runs through my heart, mind, and soul. And that's what I'm trying to present to the American people as the presidential candidate for the People's Party, my brother. Blues on the one hand, swing is the second element. You have a different conception of time, so you don't feel closed in, bound to a two-party system. We know the two-party system in America is a major obstacle for the empowerment of poor and working people. Both parties are in the back pocket of Wall Street, in the back pocket of the Pentagon, in the back pocket of big money. So you need a different conception of time. But here comes Duke Ellington. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. You got a different conception of temporality. It opens up possibilities, opens up new potentialities. So you thought that chord was closed, but here comes Monk. He got a new note. He got a new way of doing it. Here comes Mary Lou Williams, and we haven't even got the John Coltrane Love Supreme yet. Blues on the one hand, swing on the other, and then improvisation. And this is what I love about you and your show, my brother. You are improvisational. You're flexible. You're fluid. You're protein. You don't get locked in the dogma. You don't get locked in the ossified, petrified ways of looking at the world. You got to be new. You got to be novel. You got to be open. You listen to others. You can't be a jazz musician. You can't be a blues woman unless you learn how to listen to others. Jazz is the highest level of democracy in symbolic expression. What is the anthem of my black people? Lift every voice. It's not lift every echo. No, what we have, for the most part, public discourse in America, echoes of silos. Echoes of silos, expressions of very polarized spaces where no one wants to listen and lift their own voices, think critically for themselves in such a way that you can improvise. Improvisation is not simply an artistic skill. It's a species of phronesis, what the Greeks call practical wisdom. You have to be able to judge.
I love it. Carlos, go ahead. I got to go to the bathroom. I can no longer hold it. So you got to hold the people over for a bit.
I mean, just going from what we've had with Biden, which can barely finish formulating a sentence, and what we had previously with Trump, which was, formulating sentence, but not that they made much sense or were based oftentimes in facts, to going to just a brilliant mind like Cornel West would be such a radical transformation in the country. And I don't think that there's a way in which people think that you incorporate art, you incorporate music, you incorporate popular culture simply for the sake of giving what you're saying a little bit of a stylistic touch. I think that while it does do that, and of course you're listening to Cornel West and the way he brings up all of these cultural references and literary references, you're just like, at least me, I'm getting goosebumps, just how impressive it is. But it's not just something that's done for the sake of appearance, something that's done to look cool. It's got a substance to it. And as we were talking about with Dr. Montero in the last interview we did with him, we talked about Paul Robeson, we talked about Du Bois, we talked about the role that art plays in revolutionary movements. It's the soul of the movement. It's so incredibly important. And Cornell is able to capture that, which was central to this tradition, the Black prophetic tradition and the Black freedom movement, which is a synthesis of the highest form of science in the sense of the rigorous understanding of society, social science specifically, and the highest expression of art, right? And in the U.S., if there's anything that can be called American art or American culture, it's been always tied to the Black freedom movement, the struggles of Black people, literally from the start. So he's able to combine both of those in ways that resemble, of course, the tradition that he comes from. And that's an extremely powerful mixture. There's a quote that we're fond of bringing up from Daniel de Leon, who is one of the leaders of the Socialist Labor Party, the first explicitly Marxian party in the U.S., was founded in the late 19th century. But he's got a quote along the lines of saying that, the struggle for socialism is like a boat. The wooden part is the scientific element to it, really the systematic, dialectical, materialist understanding of the world. And then the moral arguments, the ethical arguments are the sail. And to get a boat moving, you need both, right? Without the sails, that boat is just going to float. And with sails and no boat, you're not doing anything. Maybe you have a flag that you can wave around, but you're not getting anywhere. And I think art plays, the way that he uses art and the role that art plays in this discourse is in a way in that role of the sail. So he's got the scientific understanding of the world, class society, the role of profit, imperialism, capitalism, and he also has that ethical argument in favor of the struggle that's always imbued with a rhythm of the movement of society and of history, which is, of course, found in his references to art and to culture and to all of these things that not just make the argument pretty, they not only embellish the argument, but they add a whole new substantial layer to it that is so crucial. It's not just about embellishing and making it nice. There's substance behind these references.
Yeah, I obviously missed a lot of what you said because I was in the bathroom, but I like what you said at the beginning about this is just so much better than anything we've heard from Biden. And like you said, we have our ideological disagreements with Cornel West. He's a Christian socialist, not necessarily a scientific socialist or a materialist or a Marxist in the strict sense. In many ways, he is, or draws upon those traditions as well. But we don't have to be in strict ideological agreement with him to recognize that he's the closest to socialism and the best candidate by far that we've had in years. He blows Bernie Sanders out of the water. I'm sorry, that's true. And then if you compare him to Biden or Hillary Clinton or Trump, it's not even in the same stratosphere. So it's like, what's the debate even over here? I don't really get it. If we got to pick somebody to back in the bourgeois election, this is the guy. He's inspiring to listen to. He can galvanize a lot of people. He's not alienating or isolating anybody with his rhetoric. This is our guy this year, in my opinion.
And I think I don't know if I wouldn't call him scientific socialist. In my view, I think after Marxism, all tendencies in the left have to at least uh, make homage to the language of scientific socialism. They can't go back to the language of let's just harmonize all classes because that's very clearly seen as not a socialist or left wing position. Cornel West is very much grounded in the class struggle. He understands the role of class. He understands the role of capitalism as capital accumulation that's grounded in exploitation that requires various forms of oppression in order to proliferate that and that develops ideas that are aimed at reproducing the material base. He understands all of that. He might not sometimes use the Marxist language, but really the core of what makes scientific socialism scientific, I think he grasps it, and the fact that he is waging a campaign that distinguishes very clearly between the working masses and the people, and the capitalists, the people who he, in a very metaphorical way, he talks about having greed govern their heart and their institutions and systems. That shows a level of understanding that's way beyond utopian socialism that has at least some foundation in scientific socialism. I don't think after Marx anything that calls itself socialist can do without that at least baseline analysis of what makes socialism scientific, a comprehensive analysis of the system, the fact that the realization that we are in a system, in a historical, non-eternal system that's called capital. Like all of these things, he understands, and they shape the way that he sees the world. So, I would say that he's got maybe not as refined and thorough a scientific base as you would find from like Du Bois, who is explicitly, a Marxist-Leninist, but he does have that scientific basis to a sufficient extent, I think.
Agreed. Let's jump into his video that we shared. with Kim Iverson. This is a little video that I clipped when someone said Cornel West combating xenophobia is so important right now. And that's partly why I shared this, partly because he's combating that xenophobia while also reaching out to disaffected white Americans, also reaching out to Trump supporters, talking about the material reasons that xenophobia is so prevalent in the U.S. and really getting at the core of the issue, which no other candidates in the race are doing even a little bit.
And there was a significant slice of brothers
Oh, come on.
and sisters, slice of brothers and sisters, vanilla and other colors as well, who voted both for Bernie and for Trump. So I'm willing to go straight into Trump country. And I'm willing to tell many of my white brothers, I know you're wounded, I know you're bruised, and I know you're scarred. I don't have any kind of xenophobia. I defend my trans, my gay brothers and sisters. I defend my immigrants who are brown. I defend my Asians. I defend indigenous peoples, and I certainly defend my beloved black folk. But I reach out to those white brothers and sisters and say, I want your basic needs filled as well. You need Medicare for all. You need quality education. You need quality housing. You need attention.
Wow, that's frozen. That's a hell of a lot more of a scientific socialist approach to politics, class relations, and class struggle than many of the people on the left that call themselves communists and that don't want to touch the white working, poor working class with a 10-foot pole. And that tell the other communists that say these people are not irredeemable, we can organize these people and pull them away from their false consciousness, that call those people, like it's happened to literally Noah, people that are in the same party have told this to Noah, have called him a bigot because he says, we could change the white working class and we can organize it. While the people that are calling themselves scientific socialists, Marxist Leninists are doing that, here you have Cornel West saying, I'm going to that part of the country that is, as Du Bois says very clearly in Black Reconstruction, a forgotten class of men, right? And part of that forgotten character that they embody reflects itself in certain political positions that they end up falling for. But if you approach them, you can bring them into the struggle because fundamentally their class interest is aligned with the interest that, if you call yourself a socialist, that you're fighting for. Socialism is nothing more than the advancement of the class struggle and the interest of the working class towards the acquisition of political power for the working class. So if you're a socialist, the thing you are fighting for must align also with all parts of the working class. If it
Yeah, and
doesn't,
again, oh, sorry, finish.
if it doesn't, there's a problem. If it doesn't, you have to, reanalyze what it is that you're calling socialism, because there's something wrong there. So there's some screws missing.
Right, and compared to Joe Biden, he's using these Trump supporters or the white working class as a boogeyman. Those people are evil, those people are racist, you have to vote for me, otherwise fascism and undemocratic, I don't even know what the word for that would be, but all these undemocratic groups will continue to gain power, and all these deplorable Trump supporters will continue to gain power. You have to vote for me. In fact, you have to vote for me or you're privileged and selfish, because that means you want a bunch of racist bigots to come to power. Compare that to Cornel West, who's saying, I don't stand up for the xenophobia. I don't stand up for any racism or bigotry towards any people, but I understand that a lot of that stems from the fact that these people's material needs aren't met. I understand that these people don't have health care. I understand that when he doesn't go more in depth here, but he understands that a lot of working class people and a lot of Trump supporters see the professional managerial class as the winners of neoliberalism, and they resent them for that. And for that, they hate their cultural politics, which tends to be based in diversity and inclusion. So again, it's and that, like Carlos has been saying, is a scientific approach to these phenomena. That is a scientific class-based approach to understanding the xenophobia in our country and the class divides in our country.
You need focus. You will never be in visible when it comes to me. I'm concerned about you, but if you follow a neo-fascist party,
You're muted.
Dang it, this is my favorite part. He's like, if you follow a neo-fascist Pied Piper like Brother Trump, you need to think again. You need to think again. It's so good.
Well, it's important what he says there. You won't be invisible to me. He says something about being invisible. That's directly in line with the tradition of Du Bois. This is a forgotten and unseen and overlooked class of men. And that's part of the paradox that Edward Baptiste's book is wonderful. But the title, if it was in the Du Boisian tradition, wouldn't be that, because for Du Bois, the story that hasn't been told was the story in terms of the Civil War, the story of the 5 million non slave owning poor whites that were in this horrific contradiction where in some cases they aligned themselves with the struggle of the enslaved proletariat. In other cases, they didn't. They just basically sold out and became slave catchers. And that story itself, according to Du Bois, not according to me, it's according to Du Bois and to, the most original thinkers in the Marxist tradition in the U.S. that have grasped the role of race and racism in the class struggle. According to them, this is a forgotten class of men. And him saying, you're not invisible to me, I think is playing on that tradition that tries to say, if we really want to unite the working class, we have to address what sort of unique forms the issues of the poor white working class, specifically in the South and parts of the Midwest. What issues do they have and how we can bring them into the movement?
Agreed. I like that too, saying, because that's what the main mistake of the Clinton campaign was thinking that all of these Rust Belt states, like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Ohio, were going to go for her after her husband, Bill Clinton, outsourced so many of these people's jobs with NAFTA, deindustrialized all these places where the jobs flowed out and the opioids and heroin flowed in. And Hillary Clinton didn't campaign with these places, thought they were just going to vote blue regardless, completely ignored those people, literally called Trump supporters a basket of deplorables, and then acted shocked when a bunch of those states voted for Trump, and still has been doing a speaking tour where she goes around and blames Russia or blames the voters themselves for her loss. Because she's a narcissistic sociopath who doesn't actually care about these people, but compare her to Cornel West. It's the antithesis. It really is. I'm going to meet your needs. I'm going to give you attention. You will not be ignored under my administration. I won't tolerate any xenophobia towards other people, but I'm going to bring you healthcare. I'm going to meet your material needs. It's the opposite of the arrogance and the narcissism of the Clintonites and of the Democratic Party, which is part of the reason I think Cornel can galvanize so much support too, is because the Democrats, the Democratic establishment right now is so arrogant and so narcissistic and so condescending and out of touch. Like, people are just sick of them, to the point where I think a lot of people will be willing to throw their support behind Cornel West.
Yeah, someone had mentioned, Nolan said, I like Cornell and support his movement, but I'd like to see if PSL or another scientific socialist party puts up a candidate. Honestly, I think that what should probably be done is to have those organizations back Cornell and put their organizing efforts into trying to have the People's Party have ballot access, or have another proxy party that does have ballot access in other states be the party that he formally runs through, even though his party ends up being the People's Party. I've heard people say that. I think the Greens have ballot access in 47 states, and I don't know if they can technically nominate him. We have a good tweet from our comrade Didier Ortiz that maybe we can pull up on this issue. But is there anything you want to say to reply to Nolan as I look for this tweet, Eddie?
Yeah, I agree, and I'm having a CPUSA meeting soon with everybody in my area. People know I'm a part of CPUSA, and remember. And that's what I'm going to push for. That's what I think the party should do. I don't think it makes much sense to, obviously it doesn't make much sense to tail any of the Democrats, but I don't think it makes much sense to run another candidate this year and potentially split the third party vote or split the socialist vote. I would love to see PSL, CPUSA, and any other PCUSA, whoever else, coalesce behind Cornel West. Like, we always say that that America should learn from the Bolivarian Revolution and the Venezuelan socialists. Like, that's kind of what they had, is a coalition of all the socialist and communist parties came together and backed the electoral campaign of Chavez. And that kind of launched the Bolivarian Revolution. I think a similar model could work in the U.S. And I think that's kind of what Cornell gives us the opportunity to start building. So I think now is the time for unity. I mean, sometimes there are calls for unity that are just random and don't make any sense. But this is a time where we could actually utilize unity, bring people together behind this campaign, and elevate socialist consciousness. Do you find?
I think that, okay. Yeah, I found the comment. I'm sending it to you in the private chat so that you can pull it up, because I think it's important to go through some of the things you said, some of the more technical things, because I think Didier is in the Green Party, so he probably has a more concrete knowledge of the mechanisms within that party and what the possibilities concretely were of Cornell being nominated as the candidate, and whether that would have itself been something positive. Because I think we can read the tweets.
Yeah, I'll bring it up. I just wanted to make a comment on this comment. I just can't believe that Joe Biden actually said that. So just a reminder that your other option in this election your other options are Trump and Joe Biden. The guy who said you have to vote for me or you're not black. So
he also said that same run that Jim Crow Joe also said, poor kids are just as smart as white kids or something like that. Very stupid, very racist thing. He says so many, like, either borderline or fully racist things that the media is just like, ha 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 ha. Let's just ignore this.
For sure. Old Uncle Joe said something racist again. Glad he's the president of our country. All right, so this is Didier Ortiz, who everyone should go follow. Excellent comrade who we love. Some people have rightly asked why Cornel West is running with the People's Party instead of the Green Party. The principal argument being that the Green Party has ballot access in 47 states, while the People's Party only has 3. However, I agree with the strategy for 2 reasons. 1, the Greens can still dominate Dr. West at their next national convention, giving him ballot access in 47 states. I'm sure that many Greens would support this enthusiastically. Sorry, I said dominate.
Can you pause that real quick? If that happens, hopefully there's coordination for that to happen. And I don't know if it could be public or not. But if that happens, then the organizing efforts of the People's Party should be in the 3 states where the Green Party doesn't have ballot access. So if that could be figured out early, so that we know what states to focus on getting ballot access in, that would be important.
Let's please, Green Party, please. I'm not a member of the party, but please do that. Please nominate Cornel West. Enough with Howie Warhawkins. It's time to come together. PSL, CPUSA, the Greens. This is our opportunity. And like Carlos said, sooner the better. Number 2, Dr. West waiting for the Greens nomination before running would have meant that his presidential campaign could have legally started in the summer of 2024. He would have also faced a highly skeptical leadership with their own preferred candidate, which is the point I've been making over and over and over again, which is that there's been a lot of problems in the Green Party with them not being democratic, with them appointing their preferred candidates, and a lot of leadership has spoken out about it or even left the party. So Dr. West's strategy allows him to start running, that is to start fundraising right away, and puts mounting pressure on the Green Party leadership to not put forward their own candidate, as well as PSL, and CPUSA wouldn't have anyways, but PSL. And this is what we mean. This is why I lost my damn mind on Kyle Kalinske in the last program. Because he's out here talking about how Cornel West doesn't understand the situation on the ground. Like, oh, ho, ho, this great legendary black philosopher is just so stupid. He doesn't know that, the People's Party has been canceled on Twitter already. Why is he running with them? He just doesn't get it. Like, the great white Kyle Kalinske. And it's like, no, he understands the situation on the ground extremely well. That's why he founded the People's Party in the first place. That's why he's not running with the Greens. That's why he announced the campaign when he announced it. It was all strategic down to the time of the announcement, right? Because nobody understands this stuff better than Cornel West. Honestly, he's been involved in revolutionary organizing and socialist organizing in the United States for the last 60 plus years. Right, so for these white social democratic leftists like Kyle Kalinske ripping their vapes to be shitting on Cornel West and talking about how he just doesn't get it is so arrogant and chauvinistic, and it's hard to not see the racial overtones. Not to beat that point to death, but it is weird seeing a white YouTuber lecture Cornel West about strategy when Cornel West's strategy is so much better. And that white YouTuber is backing Marianne fucking Williamson.
Right. And these points from Didier are so incredibly important because these are, to be fair, some of the details that you only really know if you're like in the Green Party and you know some of their structures and the timing of certain things like the nominations. But if you know that, it's so clear that if you have a party that's willing to nominate you now, that's willing to get your campaign started now and not in a fucking year, that the rational choice would be to go with that party, not to wait for this other more quote unquote supposedly purer party that now has one of its ex-leaders, parading the war in Ukraine in favor of Ukraine and the NATO forces. Not wait a year for a supposedly better party when you have one that's willing to get your campaign started right now. And these are the things that, we knew some of it. Didier helped us understand some of the more detailed reasons why Cornell's strategy is perhaps the best. And I think that the situation is probably something similar with other parties that have similar processes that would take a long time to get a candidate up and going. So, the hope that I have is that all these other organizations on the left, they come together and they actually support this third party with a figure that is huge. I don't know if I would say household name, but very close to being a household name. That has the courage that Bernie never had, and that has the policies that are not just bringing forth the best parts of Bernie, but also taking it well beyond that. Not as far as it could go, or I think, maybe should go, but still, nonetheless, leaps and bounds ahead of anything else we've seen.
For sure. And like I was saying, I'm in CPUSA. I think this is the best strategy. This is what I'm going to push within CPUSA. And I'm not saying you have to take the Midwestern Marx line on everything, but if you agree with what we're saying, if you agree that the party should come together and push Cornel West, like the socialist parties came together in Venezuela to push Hugo Chavez, fight for that. I know a lot of you are part of CPUSA, a lot of you are part of PSL, freaking DSA. I don't know if anyone who watches us is still part of DSA, but whatever organization you're in, push for that strategy. If you think it's a winning strategy, push for them to unify and not run a candidate this year and endorse Cornel West. So, Didier has an awesome bio. He mentions Tupac Amaru. Tupac Amaru is such a legendary revolutionary figure who Simon Bolivar may have never happened if it wasn't for Tupac Amaru. So, side note, look into Tupac Amaru if you get time. This is a good article about him. Sorry, that was so random. Ross, I take the Midwestern Marx line on everything. Damn right, baby. Ross gets it. He knows. Thank you so much, Ross, for the 15 euros. Appreciate you.
No, but seriously, I think that
No, but seriously, take the Midwestern Marx line on everything.
yeah, yeah. We got to start putting portraits of Eddie around the country. Built a very unwanted, at least him, he doesn't want it, a very unwanted cult of personality. Don't tell him anything either. Just build the cult behind his back, send him on a weekend to a cabin, and when he comes back, the city's filled with Eddie posters. And he's like, "What the
People
fuck
holding
is
me up. Uphold Marxism, Ligerism.
No, but on a serious note, I think that it's such a special moment that we're in, and I still haven't gotten over the sort of fanboy of the announcement a few days ago, and it's a tremendous opportunity if a big chunk of the left is able to get their heads out of their ass and actually organize for what has to be done, put petty party politics aside, inter-party rivalries aside, intra-party rivalries aside, and just focus on what's common here, opposing war, abolishing poverty, getting people the basic social rights that the rest of the European world and developed countries have already had, and that we still do not have because of the hyper privatized form that our capitalism has taken here at the belly of the beast. So there's so much on the line, and I think that Cornel West's campaign is one that its basis, all of these different tendencies that have their own disagreements will agree with. And if we can put those disagreements aside and come together to fight for this campaign, I think it could be huge. And it could be the start perhaps of a movement that goes beyond just, electoral politics, that begins to seriously organize communities and get candidates elected, not just, at the presidential level, but at different local levels, and change the trajectory of the nation. And given that the nation that we have is the heart of an empire, change the trajectory of the world as well.
Absolutely. I'll have to watch Cornel West's interview on Democracy Now. Apparently, he was giving a little bit of credence to the Uyghur narrative. But what some people have been saying is like, and as far as his position, Cornel West is by far the least hawkish candidate towards China, him and maybe RFK, right? So we know he's not going to continue this new Cold War policy towards China. And there are people who have said, there's not a genocide going on, but some of the policies going on in Xinjiang, China, I'm uncomfortable with. I think they're a little weird. I don't know. Obviously, I disagree with that because what was China supposed to do as the U.S. is funding, arming, and backing extremist groups in that region? And they took the ETIM, this East Turkestan Islamic movement, off the list of terrorist groups who then committed a bunch of massacres in China. So the government had to respond to that. But, when you're appealing to Americans, a lot of Americans don't understand that context. They just think China bad, China evil. So I'll have to watch the Democracy Now! Thing. And, it's not that Cornell is beyond critique for sure. But like, this is another example. He's far and away the best when it comes to China. So even if his rhetoric isn't perfect on China, that's not a disqualifier for me. It'll be interesting to watch the interview. I'm more disappointed that Democracy Now! Is still hanging onto that narrative. Like even a lot of the mainstream outlets have given up on the Uyghur stuff, because it just wasn't catching on. But like Democracy Now! Just keeps hitting on it and hitting on it and hitting on it. It's like, who the heck is funding you guys these days? Amy Goodman, come on. But
And I mean, Cornell's not a static force. So if this sort of inclusion into the movement happens by communist forces and Marxism, Marxist-Leninist forces, I don't see why not. As a very rational person, evidence-driven person, if we show him how it is that all of these things, like the Uyghur genocide and the Russia imperialist comments that he made, I don't know if it was on Amy Goodman's interview or on Kim Iverson's, but that he made that obviously we disagree with, how all of these comments are baseless. They're based on, certain media manipulations that he's been able to catch 99% of the time with other issues, but maybe he's got a blind spot with this one issue. Maybe he doesn't have, people in China that he can call, whatever, but if it's possible, bring it up to him. If he doesn't agree with it, that's fine. We don't need him to be perfect on that issue. We just need him to not be a warhawk, as you said. And I think that even from the standpoint of like war hawkery, he's leaps and bounds ahead of anything else. He's not looking to proliferate the proxy war against Russia or continue the new Cold War against China, which generals are predicting now that if we stay on course, we'll have a full-fledged war by 2024, so next year. So if he's against that, that's positive enough, at least in those areas.
Absolutely.
He obviously was nursed on muscle milk. Yes.
That's how you get big. It's just nothing but muscle milk. And
Chris says, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to say some nonsense.
Chris says, take the Midwestern Marks line on everything, including hot sauce. Not sponsored. Yes.
Yes.
We have our unofficial hot sauce sponsor, Murder Hornet Hot Sauce. Great hot sauce.
I'm going to eat a sandwich with some hot sauce on it later tonight. I'm excited just thinking about it. It's so good. What was that? Chris Small is endorsed for the Amazon Union. I hope so. That would be huge. That's what I mean. Like, if the forces outside the Democratic Party that exist right now coalesce behind Cornel West, we have a really good chance to do something big. I think that's the biggest one because Chris Smalls is the biggest labor leader in the country right now. If he endorses Cornell, shit's going to get wild. It's going to pop off. So I wanted to mention someone earlier when I had to go to the bathroom said, don't pull a Tycho Brahe. I don't know if that's how to pronounce it. Do you know who that guy is, Carlos? I did a little bit of research on him in the background, and apparently some other people did. This dude was an astronomer who lived a crazy life. He got his nose cut off in a duel when he was 20 and had a prosthetic metal nose. And then when he died, everybody thought that he was poisoned at a party, but he actually just held his pee so long that he died from it. It killed him. That could have been me earlier on stream.
I wish I would have had that information in like middle school or high school.
Right?
I had asshole teachers that would just not let you go to the bathroom. Like if they're in the middle of teaching, I was like, putting my two fingers up, like I gotta go, and they were like, no. It's like, bitch, let me go. I'm gonna pee myself,
bro.
Yeah,
not to be an anarchist, but like when I look back and think on the school system, I'm like, it really is just like factory schools. It's like the industrial schools that keep the kids busy so their parents can work all day, and it just trains the kids to be subservient and obedient. They took recess away from us in sixth grade. Sixth grade, you're like 11 or 12. Like, okay, you're 12 years old. Time to crack down and just sit at a desk all day. Like, no more playing outside with your friends. It's so gross. And one of my favorite and one of the most underrated podcasts we've done is the one with Curry Mallet of the Liberation School, talking about liberatory education and Lev Vygotsky and educational psychology and the possibilities for education under socialism in a system that allows people's talents and their skills to flourish rather than a system that just throws people into a one-size-fits-all machine and spits them out on the other side.
Yeah, Foucault entered the chat as soon as you started talking about the school. Prison. It's a prison. Socialism with Chris Small's characteristics. Honestly, it's historic what we're seeing. It's not like we've seen the CIO, which was founded by communists, and then the communists were kicked out. But that was a radical union that wasn't in line with some of the more trade unionist minded and somewhat labor aristocratic right opportunist policies that very massive unions take, specifically their leadership. But Chris Small is, he declared himself a revolutionary after going to Cuba. I think a week or two after that, he said, he quote tweeted to a post about Biden, being excited about Biden. He's like, hell no, or something, implying that he wasn't going to vote for Biden. So I think it's likely, especially, if the circles that he's in of radical Marxist activists have any influence on him, and if those circles themselves go with Cornell, I think it could be likely that he might endorse that. And that would be huge because like you mentioned, he's the leader of this new, more militant union movement, and it would be really cool. Also, getting the Starbucks Workers United to endorse, and like actual unions, not just union leaders, getting their endorsement will be pretty big.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hopefully, Chris Smalls does that. Shout out to him and all the fantastic work that he's been doing. Did you see this, Carlos? This is one of the funnier the mainstream media headlines about Ukraine have been pure comedy in a lot of ways. There have been a lot of just unbelievable headlines that have come out. This headline isn't good, but the way the New York Times worded this: the decision by some Ukrainian soldiers to wear patches with Nazi icons threatens to reinforce Russian propaganda used to justify the invasion. It also could give the symbols mainstream life after the West's decades-long efforts to eliminate them. Even though, as the article that we republished by Baxter Dimitri pointed out, the CIA has been backing neo-Nazis in Ukraine since the end of World War II via Project Aerodynamic. So I don't know how that's trying to eliminate Nazi symbols. Just the idea that, the Ukrainian soldiers wearing Nazi patches reinforces Russian propaganda about the invasion. It couldn't just be the truth, that there are a bunch of Nazis in Ukraine that the U.S. is giving arms to, and that's what it's always been. No. It's all Russian propaganda, and let's scold the Nazi Ukrainians. Bad. You guys are making it much harder to do Western propaganda by wearing these Nazi patches. You're emboldening the Russian propagandists. It's just so ridiculous.
It's mental gymnastics. Like, I don't see how they don't read that or write it and reread it and then realize, oh, that's incredibly stupid. That's like saying, these Nazis that are leading the struggle in Ukraine are helping Russia's false narrative about Nazis in Ukraine. What? Part of your title confirms that the thing you call false is not false.
It's so wild, and people realize it's wild. Like, I was kind of surprised.
Every time I think that Western media can't get any worse,
I made a TikTok about it and actually got quite a few likes and a pretty positive response. I'm guessing by now the Ukraine bots have caught up with it. They always do. When these videos blow up, eventually the ridiculous comments flow in, but maybe this will play.
every time I think that Western media can't get any worse, they find a way to prove me wrong. This is from the New York Times. The decision by some Ukrainian soldiers to wear patches with Yahtzee icons threatens to reinforce Russian propaganda to justify the invasion. Like, have you ever considered that the U.S. actually is arming a bunch of far-right groups in Ukraine, and that's not actually Russian propaganda? I mean, there's historical precedents for this. It's what the U.S. did with Pinochet in Chile, or with the Contras in Nicaragua, or with Janine Áñez in Bolivia, or with the extremist groups in Libya and Syria. Plus, there's hard evidence that the NED and the CIA were filtering money and weapons into their preferred groups since the end of World War II, really. The CIA referred to it as Project Aerodynamic. You can be against the Russian invasion without claiming that any criticism of the U.S. and U.S.-funded groups is Russian propaganda. Anyways, it could also give the symbols mainstream life after the West's decade-long efforts to eliminate them. And it's like, how is the West trying to get rid of these far-right symbols? They've been arming and funding these people for years, like I just said. There's this attempt to rewrite history and make it seem like the West has been on the forefront of fighting far-right extremism, when in reality...
I love how Vaush in our debate, too, kept asking me, how did the U.S. fund Nazis? How did the U.S. fund Nazis? And I said Project Aerodynamic like 70 times. And he wouldn't accept that because he's a moron and working backwards from his conclusion. But there are leaked CIA documents that show there was a literal neo-Nazi Banderite funding project called something, and then it was changed into Project Aerodynamic. And I told Vaush 27 times both names of this neo-Nazi funding project. It's been going on for 70 years. He's like, but what? How do we have proof? How do we know? How can we know? Like, because the leaked CIA documents tell us, the CIA themselves tell us. But I guess Vaush is working for the CIA, so he's just doing their PR.
Reality, they fund and arm far-right extremists whenever it's convenient for them. The ones standing against fascism still are and always have been the communists. Despite the efforts of the West to conflate communism and fascism, the West allies with fascists whenever it's convenient, whereas the communists stand against fascism wherever it shows its face. But the New York Times just filters everything through a neoliberal framework. And this article is basically just complaining that the Ukrainian far-right extremists are making it hard to do propaganda for the US, who is funding those extremists.
And then, like, the top comment that I saw was, isn't Russia far right too, though? I mean, it's just like the level of political consciousness on TikTok is so low. You get people that have no freaking idea. So I try not to be too judgmental when the comments just like don't even relate. When it's just like a propaganda talking point. Like, I go in depth for an hour and 45 minutes about how a minute and 45 seconds about how the West is portraying the extremists in Ukraine. And somebody's response is, isn't Russia bad too, though? Okay, that doesn't even really mean anything, but
it's not even close to comparison. Like, Putin in Russia is a centrist. There's like right-wing parties. His party is a more centrist party, and there's the most influential second opposition party, which is the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, the historical inheritor of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. So, you know, to talk about Putin as far right or any of that, it's just completely ignorant of the situation in Russia. And to compare it with Ukraine, it's just to be completely ignorant about the situation in both countries. You know, Putin hasn't, banished and killed communists and trade unionists. He hasn't banned languages within Russia. He hasn't banned the Communist Party and socialist parties, and he hasn't passed legislation and make it more difficult to unionize, or basically impossible to unionize. And he hasn't done none of this, which Ukraine literally has. He hasn't waged a war on people because of their ethnicity and because they want to, leave a country that hates them and that's been shelling them and attacking them. So there's just you can't compare at all the situation in Russia and their leadership with Ukraine unless you're completely ignorant about all of the facts about each situation.
Yeah, but Zelensky's a hero, though. He's a hero. I did another video about Zelensky today because I remembered this small section of Parenti's Black Shirts and Reds called "Must We Adore Václav Havel," who was like the leader of the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia or something, and he was a former playwright, the same way that Zelensky was a former comedian, and they just marketed him to Americans as this avant-garde defender of democracy. Well, behind the scenes, he's banning, opposition parties and consolidating the media, selling off the entire economy to the West and Western multinationals, all the same stuff that Zelensky's doing, as they're portrayed as these avant-garde freedom fighters, these leaders for democracy. And it's just a complete inversion of reality. And, a leader like Putin in his authoritarianism doesn't even come close to what, the comedian Zelensky or the playwright Václav Havel did. But yeah, I got one more video I wanted to show you before we jump into watching the Irish MP, Claire Daly. I've been playing one surprise news story for Carlos per stream. I've got a really good one today. Are you down to check it out, Carlos?
I am. I just want to address this quick comment from Mouse SF. First, they came for the dope eating succulent Chinese meal.
Succulent Chinese meal.
Get your hand off my penis. That's the best video on the internet.
I was so scared you hadn't seen it. I was about to pull it up.
Oh my God. Have I seen it? I quote it like 5 times a day. Just random walking. I'll be walking and I'll just quote it and try to make that guy's voice. When I was shitty on Kalinsky and I was like, but me, I was doing the succulent Chinese meal. Democracy manifest.
I thought I recognized that from somewhere. That guy was the first China supporter. Honestly, let's watch that video. I got it pulled up. This is like a former chess player who like went into, this was like the 38th time that he had dined and dashed. And they called the cops on him finally.
You just assured me that I could speak.
Sit down inside the car. We're not assuring anything. We're under arrest.
Look, I'm under what? Come on. Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest. Have a look at the headlock here. See that chap over there? Get your hand off my penis! This is the bloke who got me on the penis before. Get some cups. Why did you do this? Get some cups. For what reason? What is the charge? Eating a meal? A succulent Chinese meal? Oh, let's headlocks up. Oh, yes. I
It
see
used
that
to
you know.
bug me when I was a kid because that's not a headlock. It's a half Nelson that he's got in on him. But kids should not have had access to Live Leak back in the day. This is one of the better things you could have found on Live Leak.
Your judo well.
Know your judo well.
Good one. And you, sir, are you waiting to receive my limp penis? Now, get your hands off there. Ta-ta and farewell.
Ta-ta and farewell.
One top look.
I think that's just what it's like when British people get arrested. This is what happens.
He's British. I saw him on an interview like last year, and he was talking about how that situation unfolded. And he's pretty. That's not his actual voice. He was like doing a voice there, which makes it just all the more better.
I remember watching the Dagestan massacres on Live Leak. What are those? I don't even know about that. Dagestan. I'm just interested because Dagestan's probably the best country in the world for wrestling, tied with Chechnya. I know it was a war-torn country for a while, but
You and me, Park Boys. In North Korea, you could be arrested for simply eating a succulent Chinese meal.
Oh, it's too funny.
I can't believe people actually believe her. Like she just became a meme. So I think people are catching on to the fact that what she says is bullshit. Hopefully, that ends up being the gateway towards them seeing that 99.99% of what they say about North Korea is bullshit.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's honestly like now she's having the reverse effect. Because I've even seen like pretty mainstream meme accounts. Like maybe there are some that are kind of left leaning or they're onto sort of the mainstream media propaganda, but like accounts with tens of thousands of followers or hundreds of thousands of followers mocking Yeonmi Park. So it's almost like a bad thing for the North Korean propaganda. People just need to realize that that's everything the U.S. media says about North Korea. It's all taken from like tabloids in South Korea. Literally, like trace some of these mainstream media articles back to their original source, and it'll always be some tabloid in South Korea who's like, oh, we had a phone call with someone in North Korea, and they told us that everyone's eating rats. And then 27 U.S. media outlets publish North Koreans eat rats, and it gives it legitimacy. So, okay, sorry. Here's the article.
In the late 90s,
the video I wanted to show you.
I wonder if we can call in one of those things and just make up something very stupid, and to basically like prank them. Like this is how stupid it is. We told them that whatever they're to go back to the great Alex Jones making the frogs gay, making all the frogs gay.
We could reach out as an organization, as an institute, to every mainstream media outlet that we know would publish something about Korea, like People Magazine and shit, and say, we had some South Korean tabloids who reached out to us and shared these stories with us. We're going to publish them, but we wanted to offer them to you first.
They would 100% take it. at least like 30 to 40 would take it. And it would be hilarious. That's like what they did with the. There's this famous example, I think Parenti cites it actually, of like a scholarly paper that's just a bunch of made up nonsense, key terms juggled around, and there's no substance at all. It's just an extremely obscurely written paper. And they published it in like one of the leading journals. And it showed that a lot of the stuff that they published is just bullshit, that even them, they don't understand what's being said.
Right. We'll say this: they have to play tennis with explosive tennis balls. I heard the other day that their soccer team got publicly executed for losing a game, and then their soccer team shows up at the next World Cup, and everyone's like, "I thought they got executed," and they're like, "Oh, I guess they just got publicly punished. They changed it then." Like, oh, okay. So where are you guys getting this evidence from then? But
actually, they got a locker speech about what they could have done better.
Right.
He might have embellished it a little bit. That's George Santos level embellishment.
It is. Yeah, like that's their public shaming that they got. Meanwhile, like in the US, if you screw up, like those commentators, Stephen A. Smith and them are ruthless to the American athletes. Like these guys train their whole life, and I know they get paid a lot of money to play a game, but they train their whole lives to play basketball. And then, in this one moment when everybody's looking at them, they miss the big shot and they just get trashed for like, if that happens at the end of the season, you're going to get trashed every day that off season till the next season. They're going to be like, oh, can, Jimmy turn it around and lead his team to a championship this year? Or will he fail again and be a loser and disappoint his entire family? Find out after the break. Like American athletes get publicly shamed of anything. But here's the article or the video I wanted to show you. This is from one of my favorite history channels lately. Did the IRA help protect Lucky Charms?
In the late 1960s, Ireland and Lucky the Leprechaun were having some troubles. Ireland's third biggest export, after the colour green and Conor McGregor, was Lucky Charms, and it was continually being stolen and sold for profit by the children of the UK loyalist country of Northern Ireland. This shoplifting of Ireland's second most precious naturally occurring resource, after redheads, was deeply offensive to the proud Irish people, who felt like the English speakers across the water were mocking their culture by selling the Lucky Charms as part of a wider Belfast cereal campaign. To stop the kids from stealing his Lucky Charms, Lucky the Leprechaun enlisted the help of professional car demolitionists and individual retirement account investment managers, the Irish Republican Army, or IRA for short. To fight this injustice, the IRA did what it did best, which is drop some ridiculous bars in the form of stringed-out pub music on what they believed was further British tyranny thwarting home rule of the Lucky Charms industry.
Hip, hip, hurrah, sing up the raw, that's what I say today. And if your name's Mountbatten, on my charms you've been foughten, then prepare to be blown away.
The song movement would continue to catch on, as Paul McCartney's doppelganger would later drop a solo diss track titled Give Ireland Back to the Irish, which was in full support of Lucky's movement. Unfortunately, these diss tracks had little to no effect on stopping the stealing of Lucky Charms, and is often the case in history when diss tracks don't work, the only alternative is violence, which would carry on in Ireland for decades after. To this day, Lucky and the IRA have been unsuccessful at returning the control of the Lucky Charms to a single, home Irish control. A shout out to all my patrons.
Honestly, it's ridiculous, but it's almost like the Onion, that in doing that, it's still expressing a certain truth, which is the national liberation struggle of the Irish people, the role of the IRA, how these struggles are forced into a position where they have to take up arms, that it's not their choice to take up arms, it's the only option that's given to them. And I was thinking for a moment when it first started, like, what if we had like a documentary recommendation on the library part of our website, and we just sneak that in there? And people are like watching serious documentaries, and then they put this on, and they're like, "What the fuck is this?" Um, but I remember Dar showed us an Onion video about I forget what it was, but it was an Onion video, and he was able to connect like the message behind it to the point that he was making about the media and how the media views countries that are not the U.S. And so yeah, I think these are great teaching tools, and they're not new. They've been used for thousands and thousands of years.
Right, political cartoons and stuff like, and this is the reason I like this account. I sent the link to the channel. Like, they're all pretty well done, like this docuberry, and there's some real history in there. And they also have hilarious lines like, when diss tracks fail, the only other option is violence. But like Carlos said, there's a real message there. When peaceful means fail, the only thing that revolutionary liberation movements could do is take up arms. And usually it's in self-defense, because once they start to gain power, the ruling class starts to violently crack down on them. So I'm a big fan of this account.
It's better than any of the other videos we have seen to react to historical videos, to be honest. But
no shit.
This song, I don't know if have you heard it? Come out, you black and tans. Come on and fight me like a man. Show your wife how you won medals down in Flounder. Tell her how the IRA made you run like hella ways. From the, I forget the last part, but it's a wonderful, wonderful song. When I get hammered, I usually put on IRA music and Irish traditional music, the Dubliners, and yeah.
You ever hear? I'm Irish, by the way, Irish and German. You ever hear? Maybe that's why I'm such a socialist Republican. You ever hear our buddy our comrade Alex's story about Ireland? He was with this like liberal professor, and they ended up like in an IRA bar at like 3 a.m. with like guns on the wall. And the liberal professor was like, "I'm going home," and our friend was like, "Hell no! Like, this is where we need to be." It's like kept drinking till like 6.
We tried so hard to not have him be a liberal, but oh my god,
there was no dude that I've never met anyone who's entrenched in the Democratic Party is that family.
Yeah,
good guy.
It's a whole family thing because the kid is deep in it too. I don't understand how you're young. If you're politically active as a young person, I do not. I very much believe the statement that Allende said, that to be young and to not be a revolutionary is a contradiction in nature. Like there's something off there, right? So to see these people that are like 25, 26, 27, and they've been simping for the Dems for the last like 7-8 years of political activity, it's just it's insane to me.
It's like the kid from our college who made an attack video against me. Who like all he does is make like these videos that nobody watches, like talking about how Midwestern Marxist tankies or whatever. I'm like, dude, how do you get motivated to make these videos in the morning? Like every day, my motivation is like, I got to do something for the revolution. I got to do something for political education. If you're a liberal, it's just like, we're in power still. I better shit on anybody who wants to change the power structure.
I gave a very thorough analysis of his cognitive position today in our little personal group chat on Snapchat. But I wanted to address back on a serious note.
Yeah, I'm gonna run to the bathroom while you do that.
Okay, the casual polemic. He asks, does Midwestern Marx publish analytical Marxism? Yeah, on our website we tend to publish things that we obviously publish things that are in line with the ideological and political line of the editors and of the leadership of the institute, but we also allow for a space of debate. For instance, when the patriotism question came up a couple years ago, we had articles arguing for both positions, and we've done that with many other controversial questions. So the answer would be yeah. If it's if it's up to the standards of the website, we would be open to publishing it, especially in the areas where there's some compatibility. I think there's some compatibility in G.A. Cohen's work. I think it's worth reading, and the work of other analytical Marxists. But we consider that central to Marxism is the dialectical materialist worldview, and dialectics is rejected by the analytical framework. So, but yeah, we would be open to publishing some work in analytic Marxism, especially if it overlaps with the work that we are already doing. Like we just had for instance, a paper on a Frankfurt School grounded analysis of cinema, of radical cinema, and it was a very well written paper. And I think the parts that were used from the Frankfurt School were some of the best parts that are in the Frankfurt School. The audience perhaps knows this, but we're not fans of the Frankfurt School. We consider them parts of the compatible left. We consider their politics to be dominated by the purity fetish, and we consider them to be playing a role as what I've called agents of counter-hegemony, or what Gabriel Rocco has called radical recuperators. So definitely not favorable to the Frankfurt School. More specifically, I think Adorno and Horkheimer, Marcuse, we sustain the negative judgments, but we think he's a little bit better than the other two. But of Adorno and Horkheimer, perhaps that section in Dialectics of Enlightenment that's called On the Culture Industry is the one thing that's somewhat compatible with, I think, a regular Marxist-Leninist analysis. So the person was using that line of reasoning, and it was, I think, a really good article. And some of the only comments that we made in terms of editorialship was, perhaps you would like to mention at some point in the beginning of the article the issues that we have with the Frankfurt School, some of their anti-communism. So those are the sort of ways that we've traversed publishing things that, we don't necessarily fully agree with, or with people who we don't necessarily fully agree with, and who we've waged ideological battles against. But yeah, we would be open to publishing some stuff in that area.
Did you see that New York Times, Twitter put a reader's note, like one of those little disclaimers on that New York Times article we looked at? And they said, to add some context, and this is crazy, Ukraine's neo-Nazi and ultranationalist regiment has been well documented and acknowledged even prior to the Russian invasion. Discarding it as Russian propaganda is disingenuous. Ukraine has a history of neo-Nazi involvement, which is well established. And then there's like 20 sources. That's Twitter fact-checking the NYT and saying that, there are ethno-nationalists in Ukraine. Crazy that like an oligarch like Elon Musk running an outlet like Twitter would be more honest than the mainstream media establishment, who are pretty much just mouthpieces for the military-industrial complex. It's wild, because it used to be the opposite, right? You would talk about ethno-nationalists in Ukraine, and Twitter would put a little disclaimer on it, like this is Russian state-affiliated media, or this is Russian propaganda, and now they're actually telling the truth. So that's a step in the right direction. I think it's time, and people can tell me what they think of this, but I think it's time for us to get the blue check on Twitter so we can start uploading our YouTube videos as Twitter videos. I know people are against it because you're rewarding, people had good reasons for being against it, but they were mostly moral reasons. And I think from a pragmatic standpoint, it makes sense for us to be pushing all of our content on Twitter, especially because we don't always put our live streams on Twitter. Usually we stream to Facebook, and we would have to upgrade our StreamYard account to upload or to stream to Twitter. So I don't know. That's neither here nor there. But if people would like to see our content on Twitter, you can let me know.
Yeah, I don't know what the benefits are, or if those benefits are just attained by being verified. I think preferably we should.
No, well, there are a lot of benefits. Like, we can only upload videos that are 2 minutes and 20 seconds now, and we would be able to upload videos of unlimited length. So all of our Rumble YouTube content could go on Twitter, which would be I mean, that's where our biggest audience, that's where we have the most followers right now. The TikTok's catching up. But.
Yeah, but I mean would we be able to get those benefits if we were verified?
I don't think so. Don't you have to pay for all verification now anyways?
I have no idea.
I'm pretty sure that's how it works now, is you have to buy the blue check now, but it's just like a subscription.
So no one's just like with the blue check just because they're like a notable thing.
Right. I don't think that exists anymore. That's what it used to be.
It's worth it because there was a period where both were around and you were able to see who's got it because they were paying for it and who's got it because they're a recognized legitimate source. If that's not the case anymore, then I think that I'm in favor of buying it if it gives us access to these other things. But yeah, I thought that the verification process was still around and gave you access to that. So my idea was if we could do it through the official source and see what's required to get verified, that would be better. But whatever helps us reach the most people, I think it's the most important, even if it's not the most pure. There's no ethical consumption or, online participation in capitalism anywhere. So we have to do what we can with what we got to spread the message.
Yes, I agree. I will look into that after this, and then some people are verified without buying, maybe. But I doubt Elon is going to give us that privilege. So for $8 a month, dude, like, you guys give us enough money through the super chats and Patreon and stuff to where I feel like that would be a good investment for Midwestern Marks to put our content on another platform for you guys and for more outreach. Because of, I mean, you guys give us well over $8 a month for stuff like that. So I'll do it after this. I'll just do it. Screw it. But yeah, today, this is the other video that we had to talk about. It's a long interview, but we won't react to a ton of it. But this is Claire Daly, Irish MP, who, along with Mick Wallace, is one of the only people in the entire European Union, one of the only European politicians who is standing up against the war in Ukraine. True. Thank you, Ross. Standing up against the U.S. in the proxy war, whereas most of these European countries like Germany are just making themselves simps to the U.S. military-industrial complex, and at the expense of their own economies. Like they were saying, Angela Merkel was at least standing up for German capitalism, but now the leadership is just letting the economy become deindustrialized so they can follow the lead of the United States, the military-industrial complex in the West. So these countries are acting against their own material interests. It's a complete topsy-turvy world that they're living in, and it's blowing people's minds. And Claire Daly says so many interesting things during this interview. I recommend you go watch the whole thing at some point. But she said, like, workers in parliament, like janitors and stuff, are coming up to her all the time and saying, thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then all of the politicians, all of the people around her are saying the opposite. We need to fight for Ukrainian freedom. We need more weapons, more weapons, more weapons. Whereas the public sentiment all across Europe and Ireland, even more so than the public sentiment in the U.S., is anti-proxy war, because they're seeing their standard of living tank as a result of this, which really, really shows the connection between capitalism and imperialism. And it shows that imperialism is no longer benefiting the imperialist countries. It's going through what Lenin called the decay of imperialism. But this is one of the more interesting parts, I thought, where Claire Daly talks about why this is happening. Because I've seen Michael Hudson talk about this, and he's like, this is important to recognize for the materialist view of history. Like, this is an important development. The fact that the European countries are going against the economic interests of themselves, and even in some cases their own ruling class, their own finance capitalists, in order to tag along with the Western military-industrial complex. It's something worth analyzing for materialists. So here's Claire Daly. And by the way, this is the Duran, probably the best geopolitical news show on YouTube, or one of them. Yeah, I left this comment here telling them how awesome they are. So please, please, please subscribe to the Duran.
what is largely complete absence of debate. So, you can either be for sending more weapons, or you're shamed as an idiot, useful idiot of Russia. But again, I've heard you as well in the EU Parliament. You consistently condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine on several occasions. Yet, when you object to sending more weapons or advocate for negotiations, it's always the same knee-jerk reaction. It's not countering your argument. It's always, well, now you're carrying water for Putin. It's just did this occur earlier, before the invasion, or because I'm trying to get at the root of this? When did you stamp out the debates?
I think it's a really important aspect on this. I mean, obviously the slogan goes, truth is the first casualty of war. And that is true. And I suppose the disorientation of the left is not that dissimilar to the way in which the big social democracies caved against the backdrop of World War I and so on. These things aren't new. But what is new this time is, if you even take the Iraq War, and there was loads of disinformation, and there was loads of jingoism at that time, weapons of mass destruction and all that. But the difference was, you could articulate an anti-war position. It might have been the dominant in the mainstream media, but every article and every program featured an anti-war argument that was engaged with. So we got into the nitty-gritty. Well, is it war for oil? What's the story here? Now you.
I think she's talking about Ireland there. I don't think she's talking about the U.S., because you definitely did not get that in the U.S. media during the Iraq War. But Ireland has always been a more socialistic, anti-imperialist country. And she talks about Sinn Féin, the political party here, and she says that they're better, than any U.S. parties. They're better than a lot of parties across the European Union. But still, far too hawkish and far too willing to jump on board with the EU and with NATO. So, yeah.
Don't engage with the political argument. You just say, Putin puppet, and that's enough. Anybody who calls for peace, and there's no...
And that was kind of what was going on in the U.S. Like, it was the same strategy in the U.S. where they were like, if you support Saddam Hussein, if you are against the Iraq War, you support Saddam Hussein, and you support all the terrible human rights abuses he's done. But it looks like that argument has now completely taken over the discourse in Ireland. And she's saying that she's being attacked and blackballed now like never before. And it's unlike anything that's happened to her. And she's always, like, Claire Daly's always going viral, along with Mick Wallace, another independent Irish politician. They're always going viral for ranting about, the need for socialism and ending wars. So the fact that now she's being attacked more viciously than ever before, it shows how vital the propaganda war is to the U.S. and Ukraine, what they call the information war. Just silencing and shutting up any kind of dissent, and not even dissent, but just facts. Like you literally get attacked and smeared as a Putin propagandist for saying basic facts about this issue. So very interesting to hear how Ireland, their media and politics have consolidated behind the war effort.
Analysis or digging or space for critical thinking. Now that's given rise to a huge crisis in the minds of ordinary people. And that's why we get so many emails from people going, I think I'm going crazy. I'm the only one saying this, or my friends are repeating these slogans that they hear on the TV morning, noon and night, but they're not. The space for critical and rational debate is shrinking, and it's getting worse now, big time. I see it linked to the amount of American money, National Endowment for Democracy money, which has been bragged about as supporting independent media all across Europe. I think that money now is being called in. We have all the think tanks that operate. We have them in the European Parliament week in, week out, advising us on policy. And they never say this is a US funded think tank, whereas it's just...
So I think this is important for hitting on what Michael Hudson said. This is how the military-industrial complex has captured the media and the politics in these countries, even more than their own finance capitalists, their own ruling class. You have all these think tanks who are funneled money through the National Endowment for Democracy and probably through USAID as well. But a lot of that is used on information and propaganda. That's what Bellingcat, which is basically an arm of the NED, that's basically just what they focus on, is propaganda. Pro-Western war propaganda, and it's not just disseminated in the U.S. It's disseminated in Ukraine. It's disseminated in Europe and in any vital country. They would disseminate that propaganda in Russia if they could. They probably are in various ways. This is how they do it in Venezuela too. I was writing my book about Venezuela today, and writing a chapter about how the U.S. influences the politics and funds Guaido all this money. You got or gives Guaido all this money. You got 300 NGOs set up in Venezuela, and then the NED and USAID can funnel money into there. The NGOs give the money to Venezuelan politicians, and they just say it's charity, and it's non-governmental organizations. So you can't say that it's the U.S. government doing it. Same exact way they funded the coup in Ukraine is through like 200 to 300 NGOs stationed in Ukraine, who were then filtered money through the National Endowment for Democracy and through USAID. So this is how the US has captured the EU and turned it into this really pro-war fascistic sort of conglomerate, consolidated political bloc. And they're just viciously attacking anybody like Claire Daly, who points it out.
Taken as, well, the US are our friend. When we say, well, look, the US are interfering here and that, they say, they're our friend. What are you talking about? Like, kind of thing, even though they've done things which are not very friendly. Nord Stream 2, for example, potentially, and others. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's the whole thing, I think, is driving me crazy. I don't know. It's mental. But this idea of shutting down the space for rational debate is everywhere now. And now they've special committees on foreign interference. They are doing fact checking, but it's not actually fact checking at all. Just if you have a different view, that's it, you're gone. They are now introducing in the parliament, they're trying to criminalize and sanction people in Europe for disinformation and foreign interference without any legal definition of what that is.
And think about this from the perspective of Europeans, and it's so interesting because they are in a different position than we are in the U.S., which is where most of our analysis comes from. Their major pipeline, Nord Stream, which was a lifeline for a lot of European citizens, the gas and energy that they used to heat their homes. It's a major lifeline, major part of the European economy in general, was sabotaged by a terrorist attack led by the United States. And then every politician in this country, because they're influenced by US-backed think tanks and the NED, are going along with everything the US says, and they're not even demanding an investigation into who sabotaged Nord Stream. Like, it's literally Europe shooting themselves in the foot, making their people's lives substantially worse, and doing everything that's bad for their own economic standing in order to help the U.S. win a proxy war against Russia, because that's part of NATO's broader strategy. It's insane. It's freaking insane.
A couple months ago, Noah and I were interviewed by a Polish communist who's living in France, and he was telling us about the situation in Poland. There's usually a day where they remember and not celebrate, because they don't celebrate, but a day of remembrance for the crimes of the Ukrainian Nazis against the Poles. And there's usually festivals dedicated to it, to the remembrance and and to the fighting back against it and the beating it. But this comrade was telling us that now, because Poland is aligning with the NATO forces, if you spoke out, if you celebrated that same holiday that they've been celebrating for a very, very long time, and if you spoke out against NATO and Ukraine and all that stuff, that you can be criminalized, you can be imprisoned for doing so. So you're not even allowed to remember the horrendous genocidal crimes that the Nazis, the old Nazis in Ukraine, did against the Poles because of the political alignment. So, yeah, all of these contradictions are coming to bear, as you said, on the European people in ways that it's harder to see when you're in the U.S. Like, that angle that you just provided, like, imagine as a European, this Nord Stream pipeline is a lifeline for the energy that keeps your society going. And it was literally blown up by one of the largest and greatest acts of terrorism done by the U.S. So, from the standpoint of a European, that hits a little closer to home than from the standpoint of an American.
Absolutely. And that's where all, it's East Europe, but that's where the fighting's taking place too. And they're just closer to the issue. Yeah, and there's no reason to provoke Russia or increase hostilities with Russia. Just like the same thing with Australia, and this will become more of a thing as the war shifts from Russia to China, the US's new Cold War. Australia is signing into AUKUS, this alliance with the US and the UK intended just to threaten China militarily, when over 50% of their trade is with China. So they're continuing to do what's the opposite of the economic interests of their people, and continuing to be hawkish towards China and increase this hawkish rhetoric and say we'll stand with the U.S. and signing into new military agreements and sending weapons to Ukraine. Meanwhile, they're just continuing trade as normal with China, and China is nice enough to continue trading with them. And, that's part of their broader strategy too, to continue developing. But it's like China, you guys are threatening and attacking your major trade partners. It's like biting the hand that feeds you. It's freaking insanity, but that's the kind of subservience that the EU and Australia have to the US at this point. They're essentially vassal states, which is something that Claire Daly calls them. And I like this point that Nolan made. AOC, Bernie squad, etc., funding Ukraine war is reminiscent of Ebert and the Social Democratic Party supporting war credits. That's actually something that Claire Daly says in this interview. She says there is historical precedence for this. She's talking about Germany specifically. And she says, you had the German Social Democrats who went along with World War I, which was a devastating move to the global socialist movement. I can't remember what Lenin said about it. Something like the worst day of his life or the worst event of his life at that point. But very similar stuff is going on. And they're trying to rewrite the past too. They're trying to rewrite history, less so with World War I, but more with World War II. And they're trying to downplay as much as they can the role of the Soviets, the role of the communists in fighting fascism, and the Western collaboration with fascism, or the Western governments who filtered Nazis into positions of power after the war. All of that is being covered up so that they can portray Russia as fascist, and cover up the fascism of the neo-Nazis who the U.S. is dumping arms and weapons into. So it's disgusting. It's like living in the Twilight Zone, the way that they're manipulating reality and the way that they manipulate information and call anything that's true and factual disinformation. It's going to take a revolutionary movement to end this stuff, because I came in to see a good old Eddie rant. You want me to get more fired up about it? This is bullshit. The media's consolidated. They're lying to you. They tell you that Russia's this authoritarian dictatorship, and we got to get involved with Russia, and we got to threaten Russia, and we got to use all your tax dollars to attack Russia because they're an authoritarian dictatorship. Meanwhile, every single member of our subservient imperialist media is beating the war drums. None of them are critical. None of them are telling you the truth. There's no media that's more authoritarian, more consolidated, and more pro-war than the U.S. media. If there's any government that needs to be toppled because it's authoritarian, it's our government. So quit saber rattling towards our comrades internationally, who we have more in common with than our own government, and turn your ire towards our own ruling class. Let's go. There you go. There's a little Eddie rant for you.
I mean, my only thing would be that I'm still uncomfortable with calling it an invasion. I like the term intervention, or just what they call it, which is special military operations. And I think the comments that Dan Kovalek gave in our interview, that I think you put the highlight of, the one where specifically he was talking about how the operations of attack and shelling and bombing that were going to be waged on the Donbass region were predicted to be 30-fold as bad as anything that had been seen before. So if before there was 14,000 people that had been killed, 30-fold as bad as any attacks that had been done before. So that's what prompted the intervention to be at the time that it was. So I think also, a point that Brar made yesterday morning when we interviewed her, was that the working class does have a side in this war. I don't think it's a neutral war. I don't think this fully pacifist position is correct. We should aim for peace, but I think the conditions of peace would be accepting what the country that has been attacked and pushed to a corner has been asking for the last 2 decades, which is, don't have NATO bring Ukraine within it, demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, and both of those seem to be very rational things to expect out of Russia's neighbor. So I think those are the conditions for peace, really. And
yeah, my only thing is like, good luck saying that in the EU. Like, I feel like if Claire Daly came out and said I support the Russian SMO, she'd be fucking arrested. Like, there's only so much that you can say in this current climate. Like, even in my last TikTok video, I was like, you can be against the Russian intervention and still acknowledge the existence of neo-Nazis and fascists. Like, there are people who just kind of ride that line and don't actually, support the SMO because they understand that position is going to be really abrasive and kind of shocking to a lot of Americans and Europeans who are manipulated by the Western media into thinking that Russia's bombing civilians every day. So then, if you don't say I'm against the intervention, that's what you support. But I totally see what you're saying. I think what they should say is I'm against the intervention happening, right? I'm against the fact that it exists, but understand that, Russia was pushed to the breaking point. They were pushed to the point where they had no other options. But
and I wonder if West
ultimately on that position.
Yeah, and I wonder if Cornel West, if that's part of the reason why he's approaching the issue in the way that he is, because the party that he's
I'm sure he is.
Right, the party that he's in and the people that he's connected with in the party, I know that they're on Russia's side. They have the same interpretation of the war as I think we do, at least from what I've heard. I don't know these people, so and I mean concretely, if you're fighting for the de-escalation and for the U.S. not to send weapons and for the U.S. to stop playing the role that it's played, which has been the main one proliferating the war and making sure that there's no peace deals that are done. If you're fighting against that, effectively, you are working as a positive force in favor of what I think geopolitically is the side of the working class, which is in a Russian victory.
Right. And what I think people need to realize too, or even us, like we're educators and theorists right now, not politicians, at the moment. So we put a lot of emphasis into getting all the positions right, discussing and thinking and reading a lot about positions before we come out with them publicly, which politicians should too. But that's why we don't demand that Cornel West be 100% in line with us ideologically, right? There's a difference between a politician who's trying to generate mass support in a country like Claire Daly and Cornel West versus theorists and educators. We can take a position, even if it's unpopular, and then popularize that position, right? If they take a position that's unpopular, it might crush their chances electorally, which is why there's certain issues that you just avoid, touching. So you got to be strategic in that sense as well, or they do, and we don't as much. We should always be, what is the communist position and what is the truth, so we can espouse that position and push the public consciousness towards that position. As a politician, there are other factors that need to be taken into account. So,
right. If she comes out and proposes our position, I feel like it's more likely that more people would just shut their ears. But the approach that she's taking is allowing people to not only keep their ears open, but eventually keep their ears open to positions that are closer to ours that maybe she has, but can't be open about it.
Absolutely. Well, Carlos, do you have anything else you want to talk about today? Oh, I did want to. Oh, we got a super chat. Let's address that first. Ironic how Israel supports these Nazis in Ukraine, at the same time using Nazi techniques to torture and deport Palestine and the Gaza Strip. It's so ironic. Thank you so much for the super chat, by the way, Battle Cossack. Wouldn't be able to do what we do without the financial support of the audience. Appreciate y'all. But it is like the Zionism is fascism. You know, it's a unique form of fascism, but that is what it is. It's a fascist ideology that's enforcing an apartheid. It's so bizarre that it's, you know, like a Jewish or Israeli form of fascism, when in the last century, the main victims of fascist violence were the Jewish people. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. And Zelensky said that he wants to turn Ukraine into a big Israel, so an apartheid state getting constant funding and weapons from the U.S., basically.
I don't even know if I would call it a Jewish form. Like, I think there's quite a bit of Jewish progressives that they want to separate Judaism from Zionism completely, right? So I just call it like a Zionist form of fascism.
Yeah, but it is based on establishing greater Israel. I mean, they're taking Judaism as their base and turning it into that fascist ideology, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
I get what you're saying. I agree, but I do think it's still like they're using Judaism or turning Judaism into a fascist form. Or I don't know how to say that best, but
yeah, I think it's weird to phrase, but here's my thing. I would just like to separate Judaism from Zionism, and I think a lot of the progressive Jewish forces that are against the Israeli apartheid state, that are in favor of Palestinian rights and the Palestinian struggle, they are prone to separate Zionism from Judaism. So, when it comes to describing that form of fascism, I would prefer to root it in the Zionism and not the Judaism.
Yeah,
although,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Although they're deeply intertwined.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Right. I mean, that's what fascism does, but it preys upon the traditions of the people and turns them into hatred and violence. And it's worth pointing out that most of the Americans who support Zionism are evangelical Christians.
And anti-Semitic.
Yes.
And there's a whole lot of anti-Semites that support Israel.
Right. This is the one I wanted to cover before we head out. I'd love to talk about the implications of space travel in regard to Marxism. We actually published an article on that a while ago by Casper Rove, Space and Capitalism, basically about how imperialism and capitalism would evolve into space. I think this was after Trump signed an order to mine the moon. He was talking about how capitalism, if technology evolves to take it into space, we'll just go into space in the same way. Markets will expand and conquer more territory, and imperialist powers will fight over that territory. But yeah, pretty interesting article. Fun little article.
You know, for some reason, when I first read that comment, I read time travel and not space travel. So you had me look for the article, and I was like, why would this make any sense? It's about time travel. But now that you read it out loud, I see that it said space travel. As you can tell, it's later in the day, and there's other factors at play in my incapacity to read very well at the moment. But
Exactly. Well, with that, I think we could probably head out. This has been an awesome stream. We didn't get to the Gray Zone NED phone call. I promise I'll do a power hour tomorrow and react to that. It'll happen. But yeah, thanks for hanging out, Carlos. Oops, I still am sharing the screen. I was looking for the video Sam sent us. But thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone in the chat, all the super chatters, all the moderators, everybody who hung out with us. Appreciate you. Let's get after it and keep organizing, keep pushing socialist ideas, utilize this Cornell West campaign to win people to socialism. Yeah. Anything else you want to share with the people before we head out, Carlos?
Check out Noel's article. I think you can leave comments, so leave favorable comments. And yeah, I think it would be really cool if they can get Noah to have like a regular op-ed column there where he promotes the Marxist-Leninist, Midwestern Marxist line on a mainstream media network that has millions and millions of viewers. I think that would be huge. So go support and comment on the article and share it around.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for hanging out with us, y'all. I'll play this guitar loop. I probably won't play the whole thing 'cause it's 10 minutes long, but another great acoustic recommendation from Sam Dixon. So thanks, everybody. Solidarity.